Can't hear you.
How about now?
Now I can hear you.
There we go. So there's our technical difficulties out of the way, hopefully, for this. And this should be recording. If it isn't, look at that. It's all gone. Hi, this is the Gauntlet podcast, starting us out with technical difficulties, and Jerry and I both banging on the table at various times. See, here's the thing: is what you're seeing is the raw, unadulterated version of the podcast before Rich Rogers gets a hold of it and corrects all of our issues with it. In any case, this is the Gauntlet podcast for October. It's the second segment. We've done an earlier one in the month, and we're kind of doing our live episode as it is with Sherry and I today. My name is Lowell, and joined with me is my co-host Sherry Stewart.
Hi. Nice to speak with you, Lowell.
And today, what we're going to be doing on this live broadcast, we're following a little bit of the same format that we've done before, in that we're going to start out and we're going to be each talking about games that we played on the Gauntlet and off the Gauntlet. And then we're going to talk about one of the on Gauntlet games in particular, what we thought of it. And then the other, we're going to flip, and the other person's going to do that. And then where we would normally have a guest segment, we have some questions that we've gotten ahead of time that we are going to talk about. And we'll kind of alternate that, and we'll wrap up with Giving Me Life. We're gonna try and do this in an hour. I think it'll be no problem, since neither Sherry and I love the sound of our voices. So there we go.
Let's do this thing.
All right. Sherry, tell me, how was your September? We've seen a little bit of it. Now you've had the chance to look back at the full month. Tell us what you played off and on Gauntlet.
Off Gauntlet, I played Die, which is fabulous. 13th Age, which is going stunningly. This is with our home group. We played Scum and Villainy. We just started that campaign, and it's been a lot of fun so far. And then we started a hack of Mutant Year Zero for Alpha Centauri kind of game. So we're all playing colonists who have come down, but the different factions are all mixed together, and there's lots of pressure and stress at the colony that we've established. So that's been a lot of fun and kind of a very interesting social thing with a group of people that haven't done that kind of, I guess, the inner party conflict as much. So it's been really fun. And then on Gauntlet, we played Night's Black Agents, solo ops. Started that out. Pretty neat, actually. Legacy Life Among the Ruins, fabulous series.
Yeah.
Noir, which I loved and I talked about last podcast. And then Silent Titans, which I've really been wanting to talk about. So this is, so I'm going to go right into that. It's
interesting because I'm not particularly OSR, and you've ended up being the person who's talked about more OSR in the course of these things.
But as the thing is I think more than you, I like playing down in the weeds to a certain extent. I really do enjoy that kind of exactly how am I going to do this thing, and that is a lot of what OSR is. And it's so kind of playing those games is fun to get back in that with people and be down at that super granular level, and it's kooky and weird. And the OSR products that are coming out now are so beautifully strange and gorgeous and Baroque that it's just a really fun time to go and play those things and run into something that's not the same old.
Okay.
And Silent Titans in particular is kind of a crazy piece of art and RPG. It's very strange. It's a gorgeous OSR adventure. It was written by Patrick Stewart. It was illustrated by Dirk Detweiler-Likey, and I have to say his name because the illustrations are stunning and strange and mesmerizing. And then, of course, it's using the Into the Odd rule set by Chris McDowell. The book is so gorgeous and so intriguing that most of the people who were playing actually had acquired a copy, and they were playing in order to find out how to run it themselves because they had read it and found it kind of a puzzle. So our GM, Jesse Abelman, decided, dang it, he was going to do it. And he did, and ended up with fellow players for all the sessions were Jason Zanes as Sister Miriam, a pyromaniac nun, and Jason Tachi as Maximilian Goblins, who's my favorite of all time traveling cyberpunk doofus. His whole thing is that he thought he was in a simulation, so he didn't take anything seriously the whole way through. It was really fun to do. And I love both of those guys, but also because of Open Table, we got like a new guest player each session, as it turned out. So
Oh, wow.
Paul Kay joined us, Asher, Josh, Turgan, and it was delightful every time, and they were bewildered just like we were, because essentially the thing that I kind of like about OSR is you don't know anything about the world really, and so you really have to lean into how the GM is describing it. And what you start out with, the only thing that you have for sure that's your own is your little character. Usually you've rolled some dice and ended up with some little random thing that you got. And or you get like a real simple standard pre-gen, something like that. So that's what, with this game, you start like you roll a couple of dice and it determines which character you have. And it's also your stats. So I rolled up Belinda Hives, and that jar of ether that I got that went with it, that was the best dang thing ever. I had used it for so many things. And it was just, so you're in this weird thing of there's a world you don't know, you don't understand it. And it literally starts with, you don't remember where you were before. So it is totally clean slate. You have no knowledge going into it. And it was fun. There's a kind of tenuous discovery that goes on with OSR where you're kind of discovering the truths of the world. You hear the descriptions, you're trying to picture it, you stumble around, trying to figure out the dimensions of what's going on and what's important, and what things we have to watch out for, what's dangerous. And Silent Titans is particularly weird. There's no fallback to it being like something else, like a world, like a different D&D this thing. So you're
Okay.
really out of your wheelhouse and you're trying to piece together the meaning of the thing. So even bog standard mundane things were sort of surprising when you would discover them. Oh, good, sand is just sand. That's kind of reassuring. But a lot of the group's rhythm that you do ends up being about exploration and trial and error. Who tries what? Who does it if that fails? How do you kind of support each other in poking at the beast? And that's kind of what the group does. And then you get that rhythm of who's the leader, who follows up, who's got the back of the other people, and you switch around and you can't even say that you switch around based on strengths because no one's got much going for them. So, you're essentially trying to distribute harm around and keep on going. And the other thing that I sort of liked about it was I'm pretty sure there's like a really interesting and literary theme that goes along with Silent Titans, but I have no idea what it is. But I kind of think that, at least I hope that our railguns and our super reasonable attempts to try to reclaim our stolen Titan diamonds are sometimes going to be, a harmonious part of that imagined tapestry in the end. I just,
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What does the title Silent Titans refer to? What is, because I've only seen the book kind of like at a distance, and I've seen that it's pretty and there's these weird illustrations and things. What is it?
I think that what it is that the world has these regions, and the regions are controlled, or the nature of the regions are somehow tied to the corpses of these titans that have fallen onto the world. And so it's like think about it as every county has a titan in it, and that county has some of the nature of the titan, but the titan is dreaming and also kind of controlling things, I think, is what's going on.
Okay.
I don't know. You don't get any straight answers. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
This is sort of pieces and bits. So I would guess that that's what's going on. There's sort of things that the NPCs say that suggest that things are controlled by, a given Titan. So, and then you kind of go into the Titan and you can slay them. You get the diamonds, or I don't know if we killed it or if we just stole something from it. So it's very uncertain. So let's see here. If there's anything that I'm sure about, I do not like mechanics that leave a player doing nothing for rounds and rounds. And though Jesse was like, when he saw how many rounds it was, he cut it way down, but there still was this thing where Max got knocked out and we kind of had to wait around and for him to be able to get back in that thing. And like we were doing stuff and he couldn't, and it felt really painful. I hate that. And it's the thing is that world is so weird that I think that if ever I did it, my first house rule would be is if you get knocked out, you can at least wander around the strange psychic landscape that's there and ask questions about how the Titan is in, affecting that at least, or something, have something to do. I just, yeah, because
So is that a factor of Into the Odd? Is that
I
how?
think it is,
Okay.
yeah. And it's like you miss a resistance roll by a certain amount when it's a certain kind of attack, and that's what it is that you get knocked out. But here again, when I play these games, when I go in, I am not reading the book and being a student of that. I am letting it roll. So someone will, I'm sure could add more information on that. I'm sorry. And there's a lot of load on the GM. It was stunning after playing lots of indie games to just, I like, Jesse did an awesome job, but I was like, whoa, he must have been so exhausted after each one of those because he was doing voices and he was having to explain all of the landscape. And we would go like this and he'd be like, no, and he'd have to come up with a way to describe it. So we kind of got it and then try to figure out what would happen based on the dumb things we did. And it was really, it was a few steps away from easy, let's put it that way.
Okay, fair enough.
But he did a great job. But I have to say I would play some more. I would play some more with that group. I would play that game again, that world. There's just a kind of lovely shared discovery that goes on with OSR that feels really intimate and like you're working together in a really satisfying way. So I get the appeal,
Would you chunk out the money for the big, fine, pretty hardcover cover version of this thing that we've seen?
I don't think until after I'd played through it a bunch because
Okay.
I'm desperately afraid that I would pick it up and read through it and go, oh, and not be able to play in that moment like I was then. I really enjoyed that being in there and not knowing what was going on to some extent. And again, my fellow players were lovely, as was the GM. So I had a particularly good opportunity to have an excellent time.
Good.
I was fortunate.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say about Silent Titans?
It's beautiful, the pieces that I saw of it, and all of the guys who had it were like, oh yeah, this thing. But they were also a little bemused by it. So it might be a good actual play to take a look at if you've picked up the book to see at least how one GM handled it. So he recorded it, or at least parts of it. So you can find that on the Gauntlet.
Excellent. And we get that plug in there, which we
Exactly.
got to,
very,
contractually.
very smooth, wasn't it? Yep.
Absolutely. We're nothing except subtle. So let me talk about what I played last month. Like you, off Gauntlet, we did 13th Age. We did this Alpha Centauri hack, which I'm pretty happy with. It still needs some work, and it's a group that in a game that has unforgiving dice at times. Scum and Villainy, which I'm really enjoying.
Yes.
I've got a bunch of sci-fi games going now, and I like how it plays and the mission structure fits well with it. And then we played the sort of the rest of that die 3-4 session thing, and that was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And striking, but it's one of those games where I'm not sure I'd want to play it again. I had such a strong emotional reaction to it that I would really have to think before I went to play that again.
Like you don't know if you could follow up that energy or.
Yeah, I was so intense. It was a super
you were
intense
really
game.
Intense. You kind of ripped my heart out. So
Ripped my own heart out in that one.
Everywhere. Okay.
Yes. On Gauntlet, I ran the game I talked about last time, which was Amber Diceless. And then I also ran Legacy Life Among the Ruins. This was the one where I did a fantasy reskin of it, which went really well. I'm really happy with that. Again, I love Legacy. I think it's a dynamite game, and I love fantasy gaming, so it was perfect. And I sorely was tempted to talk about that, but I've got a different one. I also, of course, wrapped up Worldwide Wrestling, which I also ran a couple of sessions of this Gauntlet Con weekend. I had two sessions of that, which went well. But the other game I played, and the one you mentioned, is Night's Black Agents Solo Ops. And while we haven't gotten to play that much of it, I wanted to talk about it because it is something we haven't talked about on the podcast before, and it's unusual in being a one-on-one game, which we usually associate with being kind of indie and small games these days. Very intimate games. Whereas this is a big game, and it's a leaning more towards trad game, though it's pulled back from straight gumshoe. But that is a one-on-one. So Night's Black Agents itself is a gumshoe game that's been out for a number of years, primarily written by Ken Hite. He did the core stuff, and then a lot of that has been followed up by other people, including Gareth Ryder Hanrahan. Gareth Ryder Hanrahan being the primary writer on the Solo Ops book. And it's about spies who have gotten burnt or have gotten in trouble or something bad has happened to them, and that's as a result of some kind of supernatural conspiracy. They've bumped into the forces behind the curtains, and now they're kind of on the run and trying to figure out what's going on with the conspiracy. How deep does it run? How do we fight against it? What are our adversaries? It's all that kind of doing operations to learn things. By default, it's vampires in the book, but the book also includes a lot of other options for that. Though the vampires seem to be more classic, and a lot more attention is played to that. The game itself uses a one-on-one approach to play, essentially one GM, one player, and this is something they started with Cthulhu Confidential a couple of years ago, which is also a one-on-one game with here are these stories. We've got like 4 or 5 stories, and they're tied to specific characters, and got different genders and different characters in with them. And that was very popular, and they've released some additional supplemental stuff for that. What it is it takes Gumshoe in the broadest sense, which has a lot of investigative skills that have different, and I'm going to call them skills, even though they're called abilities in the game, that have different numbers on them, from 1 to 3 or so, and then general abilities, which have a bunch of different things, and then they each have a pool that they can spend. It takes that and it really consolidates, really streamlines that, to make it much easier than it is. And so that's the basic concept of it. A one-on-one game, a set character. You're actually playing a character called Layla Khan, who is a former MI6 spy who has essentially woken up after having been involved in the vampiric conspiracy for a number of years, and this is her story of getting out of it.
And she's cool.
She's cool. It's very cool.
Like,
his thing is, it's a
you will
great
enjoy
story.
playing her because she's really good. So.
And I'll come back to that because I think there's some really interesting choices that are made there and going that direction with the game. So the original Night's Black Agents, I do like. It is a cool concept. I've always really liked the idea of it. I really like the concept of it, but it is so crunchy. It has so many bits, so many numbers, and lots of bennies and cherries and things like that get more advanced and more elongated as you go along. The expansions and supplements for that only make that more problematic, at least for me.
Yeah, they took Gumshoe and then they GURPified it.
Yeah, it's very GURPed.
Yeah.
If that, we'll make that a verb now.
Yeah.
This minimizes that. by instead of having discrete numbers for each of the investigative skills, you've got just this pool of pushes. Okay, you can always use the investigative skills, but if you want to get additional stuff, you can spend one of your 3 pushes to do this. And this is something that is in Cthulhu Confidential. It's something that's in the Yellow King game. And then on the other side, where you'd usually have a pool of points that you go, oh, I want to make this roll, and I'm going to spend 8 points out of my 16-point pool to make sure I get this roll. Instead, each general ability you have the same rating in, and when you do it, you're rolling a pool of dice trying to get to a certain number. And if you have to go back to that skill, that ability later on, it's reduced. It seems complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's still some resource tracking, but it's much easier to manage. So I like that. I like seeing the game kind of pull back. I think it could be pulled back more, but I think right where it stands is pretty solid. Um, they have a very cool thing where for results and for tests, like if you do well on a test, you can get an edge that you can then later on spend. Or if you do badly, you might get a problem that you have to deal with. And they've got these in the book on cards, which you can then print and cut apart. I like them, and I really hope that at some point Pelgrane takes those and like makes them into drive-through RPG cards with like the mini stuff. I think they could do that, and I would certainly buy a set of those to have, because they have ones that are key to each specific adventure in the book, and then they've also got a set of generic ones. I always like cards that you can spend and play with and all that, so I really dig that.
It actually is a clever, like it feels good when you're doing it.
Yeah,
So
it's nice having those. It's nice having, okay, here you go, you get this reward for having made this roll, or here's this problem that you're very conscious that now you have to deal with you don't have any ammo. How are you going to solve that problem? Um, it is a very cool idea. I think that a lot of those concepts that are going on in there, and I know people who've already engaged with Cthulhu Confidential and the Yellow King already know this, but I think it'd be very easy to bring some of this stuff over into standard Gumshoe games. Uh, I think it could actually be a really good 1 GM 2 player game. I think with Night Bike Agents, that would be really, really cool. 2 players could divide some of the responsibility. You'd have somebody to bounce plans off of, but you wouldn't, overwhelm in terms of time. So I think that would be really, really, really fun. So there's a lot of good stuff there, and the story, the setting, it's uses sort of Central Europe. It has a lot of great detail in it. Having the main character as a woman is great, because she's a really cool character. It's really interesting. It is possible to make up your own characters using the system, and it is possible to change things around. But I think the main character's story is so interesting and compelling, and so reaches into that subtext about abusive relationships and control and power that I really like to see played out. It's not super explicit, but you can play into it as much as you want. So I really like it. And Sherry, you really like the character.
I liked it. I think that she had a non-routine set of abilities for a badass woman character. Didn't feel cliche. And as soon as I saw him, I'm like, oh, this is a really cool set of approaches that I can take to solving problems. So for me, it was a really edifying group of things. Um, uh, you've got, I mean, you've got the basic set of things that you need, but when you're talking about all those skills and you wish there were more, I'm glad there's as many as there are, because you're actually spending those and burning them out as you go. And as you go through the adventure, until you get a chance to like rest and everything, you actually have to solve problems with different skills because you don't have anything left in other stuff. So, I mean, you've burned out your abilities on that. So having a wide set of skills isn't the worst thing. The thing that I think that they really improved on is the names are more intuitive
Mm-hmm.
for what they do. So that's a big help.
Doesn't have the Ash and Stars problem.
No, where you're like, what?
What is the skill? I don't understand what's going on here. So I really like it. Let me say this before I move on to what is going to sound like some negativity about this. I want to say I really like it. I think this is dynamite. I'm very excited about this. I can't wait to play it more.
I enjoyed it, and it's a very intense, but it's not intense. Well, there's an emotional stuff, but it's intense like problem solving. So when you're playing it, you don't want to be feeling like you're a little sick or anything like that. You got to be all there. At least your brain does.
That is a good point. Um, it has some things that I need to think about, and I think I need to consider as I go forward. One of the things is that it's a big book. It's a almost 300-page book. It's a hardcover. It's a beautiful hardcover. Of that, the first 120, I think, pages are rules. They are not. They are going through. This is how the system all works. This is how different tests go. These are what the different options are. These are different things. Um, so there's still a lot of stuff and stuff that you kind of have to read through to be able to unpack how to run the game itself. The game also wants to give any GM all of the tools that they need to run this story. And that means covering all of the bases. And that means there's a lot of material in the stories, and there are only three adventures, three scenarios in this book, in this main book, but they're long because they spend a lot of time going, if they go this way, here are the things that are involved with it. If they go this way, here are the things that are involved with this. Rather than taking a lighter, more outlined approach, which instead we've got a denser approach because they want to make this so that any one GM and any one player can play this out. It's a thick description, and I think that's great because when I go through and read through it, I go, okay, oh, this base is covered. I can see how this connects, but it's a lot of stuff to get through. And if you're not comfortable prepping modules, if you're not comfortable mapping out those options, this is not going to be the game for you. Um, I mean, I like it, and I think it's good for that. It does make me wonder about how challenging it's going to be to translate these mechanics over to some of the existing Nice Black Agents material, like the Zelazny Quartet, or more particularly the Dragon Dossier. I actually had a chance today to play in a game run by Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, and I mentioned some of this to him, and he said that it's ironic that if you're just willing to kind of very much go into it improv with those books, then that's easier than actually sitting down and trying to map out all the choices and write them all up. Like that's a more difficult thing. So there is a lot of stuff in it. It's not a light game. It's a game you're going to have to read to be able to run. And it is streamlined, but it's not streamlined. It's still got a lot of choices, and a lot of cards and a lot of options. I will say this: Sherry in our play has been pretty lucky with her rolls.
It was crazy. There were D6s, and I was still rolling well. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? No, it was insane. And I know that the next time we play, it's not going to be this good. And I was still having to manage resources and
Mm-hmm.
watching, you know,
And I
watching games
don't
drop
know.
out.
I don't know if we played and you had really bad rolls, how that would feel if the game does have some ways of pulling that back. And they may have worked it to balance.
Mhm.
But that being said, then I think that if you're running this sort of off the cuff improvisationally, if you're doing it on the fly, you're going to have to really keep an eye on that because I think it would be very easy to put players into a death spiral. I think
Mhm.
even more than say a PBTA style rolling down the hill. I think it'd be very easy to get stuck in a loop that players couldn't get out of and get frustrated. I say that not having had that experience yet,
Exactly. So
but
far, I've
but
been able to get rid of my problems as fast as I get them.
yeah, and I don't know if that's a factor of the game in general or a factor of the scenario design. I
I
just
don't
don't
know.
know. Um, so my takeaway is that I really like it. I do.
I do too.
Regardless of all the potentially negative things I've said here, I'm digging it. Sherry, what do you want to say?
I want to say that I was playing it. I know that all the stuff was mapped out, but I felt like I was doing my own thing and Lowell was handling it pretty well. I didn't have any sense that I was walking through a module. Does that make any? I mean, everything was all ready and there was always a card for me to go and pick when that thing happened. So I knew you were, but when I was doing things, it didn't feel like I was choice A or choice B. All of the choices were in front of me, just like it would be anytime. And I could say a thing, do a thing, kill a former colleague, and it all turned out natural and fine. That was.
Yeah, because you shocked me with that moment there
There was that whole thing about how
where you
she had that
smoked a
memory.
fool,
I smoked a
and I did
fool.
not think you were going to do that.
It was that was her self-hatred. That was that
Fair enough. Fair
expression
enough.
of self-hatred.
The other expression is you banging your keyboard. Is that the other expression?
Yeah, that's the
Self-hatred.
other one. Everyone likes that.
Okay, I know. I don't think we get fan mail about that.
Exactly.
So I think that's all I have to say about Night Blockade Solo Ops. I'm hoping, as they've done with Cthulhu Confidential, that we'll get some more expansions or some guidelines for translating some of the existing material. Let's go to our second segment here.
Okay.
Normally in our second segment, we would have our guest talk about something they worked on or a topic they want to cover or whatnot. Today we're answering questions. We have a set of questions here we have taken in our Q&A segment. I've got them here. Sherry and I've only kind of briefly glanced through them. We're going to swap out asking these questions of each other. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to put a question to you, Sherry. And this is something that Jim Crocker brought up to me earlier this year. At Gen Con, I had a chance to sit down with Gene A, and Gene A likes to collect gamers' origin stories. And so he asked me about where I'd started and all of that and how I'd gotten into the hobby, and we talked for a while. So Jim actually had asked about other people's origin stories. So what is your origin story for this hobby? How did you get into gaming?
Well, do you mean when edifying gaming started or when I was first exposed?
You tell me.
Okay. So many years before I actually had an edifying gaming experience, I remember being over at my friend Fred Schall's house. And I remember very acutely that we were all hanging around listening to some flute music in a pyramid with a beetle. I don't know. I don't
This
know.
is
It was
oddly specific. Okay, go on.
it was. It's a very specific memory. It was a very sensory memory. I remember the shag carpeting. I remember things were done in brown, and he had these D&D books. And I said, oh, can I look at this? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so I opened it up and I kind of read the directions for the character creation. And then they had this equipment list. And I was like, oh, an equipment list. And so I literally ignored the guys for the rest of the afternoon and just read like the equipment list and tried to figure out with the starting amount of money that I got, what would be the best combination of things that I could get. But I didn't ask to play the game. I didn't really have any sense of that until college. And then that was just all horrible. Kind of depressing, but I still wanted it. There was a brilliance that I saw there in those item lists that I so wanted to get back to. They just suggested so many things, so many opportunities. And
that's really interesting. That never occurred to me.
really?
Yeah, no, I remember making up characters early on, but equipment was what you wrote down. I was always like how what is this character's name and how do I make up a bunch more characters that have different weird names and stuff?
Oh, see, to me, it was weird because when I read it, I didn't recognize Tolkien in it. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was all very foreign seeming, the character things and stuff like that. And so the thing that clicked that I connected to was the lists of things. I think because I had always been raised on that sort of like my side of the mountain and those survival, kid stories and stuff. And so this was sort of kind of like that, like adventure survival. And
That
so
makes
that was
sense.
my first hope for it. So,
All right. Well, that answers that question. Why don't you look through this list and choose anything you want? Doesn't necessarily have to be in order. What question do you want to put to me here?
yeah, I like this one though because you've been writing some genre games. So, are there any genres that click for you as a game that you otherwise don't enjoy that much? Like you wouldn't read that genre or watch that genre?
I don't know as I would actually sit down and watch a telenovela.
Mhm.
I mean, I've watched K dramas and I enjoy that, and I've watched the wuxia dramas. I'm not sure if I could watch telenovela, and yet de las Pasiones is really compelling to me. It's really really interesting and compelling, and I like it a lot. Um,
You always
I,
walk
I,
out of those games like just glowing,
right.
like, you know, so
Um,
happy.
and certainly on the sort of flip side, I didn't care for professional wrestling before at all before I played worldwide wrestling. That certainly turned me around.
Oh, and I would say I had let you watch your martial arts movies, but I'd never really paid attention to them. I think I remember that scene with the woman in the tofu with Michelle Yao and the tofu in, is it
Wing
Wing
Chun.
Chun? Yeah. That's like the only thing I had going into the first game of Hearts of Berlin. And then after I played it, I was crazy to watch all the rest of it because all of a sudden I had a thing about it that I understood a linchpin of at least some of the movies. So sometimes a game gives you some of the pieces that you need to understand what's beautiful about a genre, if you're lucky.
That's a really interesting way to put that. Let me ask you another question here from this list. Um, as a player now, having played long term face to face, and now having had a chance to play a lot more online, what do you see as, from your player's perspective, the difference? What is the difference in feeling you're getting between those?
Okay, so online is super like you as a player have to put a lot of energy into scanning what other people are doing and what the GM is saying. It's like you have to keep redirecting your energy because the screen just isn't as galvanizing as as people's physical presence. And you don't get the body language clues and um, the sort of little reactions all the time to get a sense of how your other players are acting. So in order for you to be there, you have to be a ton more present, I think, on online. And if you aren't, you're missing out on a lot. This is how I feel. This is
Okay.
for me, it takes a lot more energy for me to be a very present player online than it does for face to face. Face to face, you just got so much more information coming in from the other players and from the GM, just that is so easy to catch. And because they're all reacting relative to each other immediately, there's not that delay. There's not that starting to talk. You rarely talk over another person at the table
Right.
unless you're a talker over person. But, but I mean, you can see that someone's getting ready to talk. It's harder to do that online because sometimes you have a delay or you aren't catching their face in the little box. you know it's just that weird thing of you can't see everyone as well, so you just have to be a little bit more present. um,
I wonder how much the kinesthetics of, like, when you're at the table, you're physically rolling dice, you're kind of moving around, maybe you're going up and getting a soda, you can shift books around. Whereas when you're online, that's much more distracting, much more disturbing for the other players. And so we tend to keep ourselves more still. And I wonder if that works against our ability to immerse. Like moving may make that easier. Because sometimes I do get lost when I'm
mhm,
just sitting there waiting.
mhm. Yep. And I mean, it's easy to do, especially when one or more players have a significant delay in their response because just because their signal's not that great or something. And it's just like that extra zero point 0.4 seconds and your brain is off in another place. So I do think you have to watch yourself a little bit more carefully. It makes using certain kind of materials harder. So, because you got to flip between tabs, and that can be like, when you go to roll dice, you don't just pick up some dice, you got to flip over to another tab and do it. But I don't know, it's worth it. You can play this much huger range of games and dip your toe into a bazillion things that it would be very hard to drag a face-to-face group through. I mean, you can. We've done it, but we couldn't do it for as long as we have been able to play online games.
True. All right, let's have you pick another one of these questions to throw at me.
Let's see. So I think that I have to ask you, like, when you're considering what you want to run, how are you approaching that? Are you thinking about rules? Are you thinking about, I want to try something like that? Or are you going about for a setting?
So when I think about what I want to run face to face and when I want to run online, it's drastically different in terms of my considerations. Face to face is I have a group. I know what our nights are. I know what our people are like. I know what games are not going to fly. I know what games are not going to work. I know that I love Alan, but a game with in-depth mystery solving and calculation is not going to be his bag. I know that certain kinds of cerebral games are not going to be great for certain people, or certain kinds of action games are not going to work for others. And that's because I have those groups set. When I'm thinking about online, my primary considerations are, number one, does this work online? Mechanically, can I do the mechanics online? Is it too complex to handle online? Do it have too many dice mechanics? Are the character sheets too involved? Would I have to use Roll20 and figure those things out? It's part of what keeps me from doing as many, say, mutant games like Mutant Year Zero, because the die roller there is involved.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. And number two is going to be, can I make it fit into the 4-session or 5-session thing and have that work and tell a satisfactory game? I think those are like those are the two big things that I think about first. And then the other thing I think about is, if this is open table and we have a variable set of people, is that going to work or not work? Like, do we have to have the same players, the same characters from session to session? And if we do, then that's going to go to the back of the queue. I'm gonna look at other games first. It's not necessarily that I'm never going to run them, but I'm going to look at the other games first. So for me, very much my first consideration is playability and accessibility online. That eliminates a bunch of games, and then after that, I start thinking about, these are the things I want to run. These are things I really want to do. So does that seem like a fair answer?
I think it's fair.
Sherry, what would be your dream game, series, or campaign that you'd love to run or play online?
Online. So
Online.
that is interesting. I think, see, here's the thing is, I've always had this idea that I wanted to play like a Tellier game, a making alchemy game, that kind of thing. But I've come to realize that's pretty much just a game about doing combinations, and that's never going to be a role-playing game. That's an awesome computer game, right?
Okay.
But the other one that I like is the idea of the players working together to aid someone. And I do think that, in fact, probably my dream game currently, the best one that I've seen of it is actually Girl Underground. And so I probably need to get myself into a game or run it, because it is literally a group of players gathered around one other player, and they all aid them on a journey. And that has always been a sort of, I don't know, game that I wanted to play, about really just a diverse set of people or things or ideas helping someone along, not having any control, just helping.
Nice,
So
nice. I like that. To keep that in mind. I have Girl Underground, but I haven't. That is not one that I have yet put, up on the calendar. I need to do that next year.
I would appreciate that.
Back to you for throwing a question at me.
Okay, so I like this one. You created action cards, which is a tweak to Fate, and you're running it with your home group. How do you feel about it now versus when you first made it? And if you restart all over again, what would it look like?
So
This
action
is yeah,
cards.
this is our face-to-face
Yeah,
group. Yeah,
one of our big games we've constantly played for the last, gosh, going on almost 20 years now is action cards, which has evolved, has gotten more fate to it. Essentially, each player has a unique deck that they get to tweak and write on and modify, and it uses a lot of fate. And I like a lot of it. Um, and we've simplified a lot of things. Like we've simplified magic and we've simplified damage and things over time. And I like the iteration that we've got now. Um, but I I kind of don't like the success scale as we've got it set right
I knew you
now.
were going to say that. I
Why?
knew you were going to say that because you're always like, "Oh, I got to make this harder," and it's like that's not even how we play.
It's not. Oh, Jesus wept. It's not quite that. It's that one of the things I like about PBTA and PBTA style games is that roles generate fiction. They generate results. And as it stands, action cards is still very much in a success fail mode. And I'd like to look at how to modify that to be less specifically success fail and fatey success levels and so on.
See, I
Your
I would
response?
say that yes, that as a player, I don't read it as a success fail mode. It feels more like what am I using my resources to make sure succeeds brilliantly, and also what brings me back to my character in my successes and fails because that card system because it has our faults on it and our strengths on it very particularly reminds you it brings you back to your character and
I wonder if what I need is a better, clearer sense of when when there is success with cost, what kind of cost they are, and putting those out there because we've seen a lot of different options with that now. The way that Forge in the Dark works and with those things, and maybe it's that I need to look at that. One of the things is I say all this shit, but when push comes to shove at the table, I want to move things fast.
yes
And I get all these ideas for complicated things, and then when we get to the table, I'm like, nope, we got to get going.
yep
I don't want to calculate encumbrance. I don't want to have to worry about damage types. I don't want to have to figure out these things. So
yeah
I'm a
I want to move
massive,
tokens around so I don't
yeah, I'm a massive hypocrite
yep
about all of this. So
no I would say for our face-to-face game this is pretty much I know that you have ideas that you would change this and it would somehow do something differently. And I think it's like completely tailored to how we play. So that's the
uh,
problem with a house rule. You can never take it out of its home, but it works brilliantly where it is.
well, let me ask you this. Is this kind of a related question that's put there? And I'm kind of modifying it from how it's been asked. Are there mechanics that you have seen in games you've played recently or further ago that that really work with the setting or really like kick it up? You're like I really like that mechanic, like that mechanic rather than just the play experience. This thing is really making it great and giving me that as I think Alan put it, this hell yes session that you get out of it. Can you think of anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I have to say that the veil And all of a sudden that switch to working with, and it's two things. It's two things working together in the veil that gave me that hell yes. It was that when you're rolling on your emotions, and inherently when you're doing that, you're describing how your character feels. So you're living in that so much. But the other thing is that each of the characters have these sets of questions and like themes that they bring into the game. And so you get this thing of here you are, and you have this emotional wash that you're doing as you work through the game, but you're also reflecting on these themes that go along with the particular character that you picked. And I wouldn't say it was hell yes as so much as like, oh, yes. It was like, it felt so anime. It felt so kind of not emo, but really truly emotional. And that
Mm-hmm.
kind of, but it was that sort of, this story has these themes, has this meaning that they're trying to work through, that they have these, you know, big ideas that they're actually smacking up against over and over again. It was like, it just felt like more significant because you were playing it that way. It all felt more significant. And it was just a real delight to do that. And I loved playing it slow. And I loved playing it sort of thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I know that since it's cyberpunk, people are always like action, action, action. But that nice slow game that we played face to face with, it was just it was chef's kiss. Like it just so good. Um, like I mean, we were playing with my niece and nephew, and they're young, and I think my nephew was the first like real full game he played through, and he just it like blew his mind. He loved it so much. Yeah,
Let's give you one more question from me.
yeah. Let's see here. Oh, I got to read.
Yeah, you got to check
I
the
know.
list of
There's so
requests.
many good ones
There
too.
are.
Um, let's see here. Oh well, you're a prolific hacker of games, Lo. So are there things you look for in a game that like make you want to hack it, or are there hacks that you're like you haven't found a base system to use for? Like there's something you want to hack, but you haven't found the base system for yet.
For me, that what always pushes me to hack is if I go and I see a published setting that I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. I really want to play that. And then I go to the book and I'm like, oh, that's not what I want to do. Um, that's how our Changing the Lost PBTA game came about. It's
Mhm.
kind of how the Crow's Mantle game that I ran about kids in a Magic Kingdom growing up back in the real world. Um, there's a lot of that kind of thing that I really like the ideas of, and I want to try in another context, another set of rules to get at what I like about them. Um, I think there are. I think Mage, the Ascension, and related to that, Mage Sorcerer Crusade. I love the idea of that, but I'm still not sure how you would hack that. Um, and I had the same feeling about like a couple other World of Darkness things like Promethean or Demon the Descent. They have a lot of really interesting ideas in the setting, but those rules are just way too arcane and dense for me to want to spend the time to play. And that's the kind of thing I'm drawn to. Like, and sometimes it actually when I go to hack, I begin to realize I'm not sure exactly what is drawing me to the game. This is the problem I have with Fading Suns. I love Fading Suns. I have all the Fading Suns books. I have, same thing with L5R. These are things where I have all this stuff, and especially with Fading Suns, I'm like, oh, look at all this cool stuff and spaceships, and we got these orders and things like that. But then when I actually go to kind of look and go, okay, well, how would I run this? What would I want to do? What would the play be like? I'm like, yeah, once I actually really take a hard look past the really wonderful veneer, I'm not sure if the play's that great. If I can figure out what it is I want out of it, and I still haven't. I still keep buying Fading Sun stuff, and I still don't know what I would do with it.
Yeah, there's something appealing about that. There's these families, and you pick one of those, and they're working with these. It sounds great, but then you go, wait, what are they really doing?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that is the thing. Is nothing like trying to hack something to make you realize that you're not sure what the game is. Sherry, let's move to our final segment here,
all right.
and so let me say this. So, Sherry, what's giving you life?
Okay, so I don't know, a bazillion years ago, uh, Zubin Maria Rivera was on Slack, and she was talking about Troika and that she wanted to hack it for this and hack it for that. And she was obsessed. And I was like, huh, Troika. And I didn't pay much attention, but then I would see it pop up and I would always think about Maria. And I would always be, well, she likes like all the same things I do. So maybe I should check this out. But still, I didn't know what it was really. It keeps popping up, popping up. Finally, on Twitter, I'm reading it and I'm seeing Troika popping up again, and I realize one of the people I'm following is actually the author of it. So I'm actually paying attention finally, and I'm like, oh, this guy seems like he's smart, and all the people that are like doing Troika hacking and stuff like that seem like they're really awesome people. I should take a look at this. So I finally had you order it. I got the book, and I love it so much.
Yeah.
It's brilliant and it's fun, and I actually think I'm going to try to GM it. So
Wow.
yeah, well, you get to be the first sample player. So good luck to you. But I definitely think I'm going to try to write it, run it, and see if I can do it justice because it's kind of shiny and wonderful and shaky and just there's something in it for everyone. It's just, man, my heart opens up because it's full of wonder. It's all the children's books mixed together.
Awesome. What's given me life is, of course, this is Gauntlet Con weekend. I've already run twice. I played once. Was partially what's given me life is the chance to play with new players. I love playing with new people. It's just so cool to meet and have a good experience with that. But then the other thing is, I got to play with one of my favorite players today, Lloyd Gahn, who I adore, and that really just gave me life. I love playing with Lloyd. He is a good human being, and he is wonderfully upbeat and curmudgeonly all at the same time, and he's great. So that is definitely what's giving me life. So, listeners slash viewers, that's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. You can check that out. We've got a Twitter feed that I manage. So sometimes it's supremely boring, but there we go. You can also find us on gauntlet-rpg.com. That is our main site that has links to our Patreon that supports the podcast and all of that. You can follow us up on that. If you're listening to this as a podcast, even if you're not, you're just watching the video and you're like, oh, I should probably do something to help these people. You can back the Patreon, or you can give us a review, star us. That does help. It pushes us up in the things and is appreciated for this podcast or any of the others like Plus One Forward or Fear of a Black Dragon, any of those things. So Sherry, thank you for being willing to do this live episode.
Always a pleasure, and thank you for the questions.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank Jim Crocker and Alan and Alexi and Rich Rogers and Blake Ryan for submitting those. That is all appreciated. And if you're watching this during GauntletCon times, I hope that you have a great rest of your convention. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Good night.